Hello, everyone. Oops. So, my name is Dave Lalazerne, and it's interesting to note that alfalfa is actually the English word for La Luzerne. La Luzerne is the French word for alfalfa. I'm actually half Belgian. My grandparents grew up here, lived in the Green Bay area, Brussels, and my dad grew up here. But anyway, so alfalfa, we're talking about foraging today. It's a great forage crop. Actually, that's why you find so much of it around everywhere, because of the foraging. Farmers will have it, and then it gets out of the field, and it grows wild all around the place. And it's actually very good for humans too. There are many greens that are the first things that come up in the springtime, and that's what people who are foraging are looking for oftentimes. So when I was growing up, I grew up in Milwaukee, and I lived on Kinnickinnic Avenue. And Kinnickinnic is actually the Indian word for the herbs that they use for smoking. And one of them was bearberry, which grows all around Door County, especially on the lakeside, in the ditches and stuff like that. And it's an herb that is often used by herbalists, but Indians used it for smoking. And they would oftentimes combine it with other herbs, though. It wasn't the only one that they had. They also combine it with red dogwood. They would actually strip the bark off the red dogwood and dry it. And they also used the bunchberry, the leaves from the bunchberry, which grows quite prolifically around Door County. So Kinnickinnic Avenue. I was raised on Kinnickinnic Avenue. I think basically I feel like sometimes thinking like I was born with a green spark in my heart, and that this was the this is why I have such an interest in herbs and plants. So Kinnickinnic Avenue. So then, if I fast forward a little bit, not to bore you with my entire life, I actually went to pharmacy school in Madison back in the 70s, actually late 60s, early 70s. And one of the things I was fascinated by was the whole concept of the origins of drugs. And for a long time, one of the most commonly used and oftentimes the number one selling drug in the country was digitalis from the purple foxglove family. And it's interesting that this was actually something that came into the so-called materia medica in 1755. An English doctor named William Withering used a folk remedy that he got from a lay midwife who lived in the village that he practiced in. And she would mix this concoction that included foxglove and other herbs for people who had heart problems. And you could see him, he's actually holding a foxglove in his hand right there. So this whole idea that the drugs that we use come from plants, so many of them come from plants, was fascinating to me. And I started to look more into the plants themselves. I thought, hey, this is more interesting than the drugs in many ways. So one of the plants that you can forage for is asparagus. The wild asparagus, you probably see it growing all around. This is also another escapee from gardens, but it grows quite a bit, especially here in northern Door and along the Green Bay shore, the Green Bay area of Door County. I find a lot of it. And when I was in pharmacy school, I had to go through 6 years of schooling and then a year of internship, and I was just tired. And I decided I wanted to get away from everything, so what I decided I was going to come up to Door County. My family, I've been coming up to Door County since I was about 10 years old. My family always vacationed up here. And so it just made sense to get away after so much work to get my degree and to get my license. And I brought along with me a book called Stalking the Wild Asparagus by Manning and Ewell Gibbons. Actually, I had some copies of that book up here, my original copy that goes back a ways. He was really the first person that talked about foraging and, and how you could use wild foods. And so I started looking for the wild asparagus. I remember finding out, and he talked a little bit about some of the herbal uses of different plants, which is what I'll be talking about too, and the berries and everything that you could use to eat and survive. And the thing about plants growing, especially in the spring, back before there were grocery stores, is that they were a source of so many nutrients that you couldn't get during the wintertime. And so that's why foraging was important, because you could get your vitamins and your minerals and stuff that you could survive on wheat and meat and cheese and stuff, but it didn't have all the nutrients that you needed. So that's what foraging is so important. So before there was a grocery store, the Clover Farm store in Ellison Bay. I think it's an interesting name, but this is where I live right now, in this store. My wife is a potter, and we have a pottery there, and Lynn's Pottery. And this picture was taken in 1938. And I thought it was interesting because one of the things you'll notice, especially if you walk around this property, there's a lot of different types of clover growing, and clover actually is a nutritious food. But this is the inside, Dick Wills of the store. Right now, this is exactly where our gallery is. As you can see, I mean, he had a meat counter and everything. And so this was one of the first grocery stores up in Northern Door anyways. And before that, we had up until about 1900 or 1905, we had quite a large Indian population. There was a small village here that was, I'm not sure exactly where it's situated. I think it was near Kangaroo Lake. But they would, of course, do a lot of foraging. The Indians, that was where a lot of the plants that we see now that we learned about are because of Native Americans and what they could teach us. A lot of herbalists, look at Native American. Well, people call them shaman, but they're basically herbalists and they're medical practitioners for information about how to use the plants that we live amongst. So I'd just like to read something. One of my favorite herbs, and I think most useful one that I'm going to talk a little bit more about than some of the others, is dandelion. I just wanted to read this from Euell Gibbons. Until quite recently, thousands of people about the earth died each winter and early spring from diseases now known to have been caused by vitamin deficiencies. Ancient herb doctors dug up the perennial roots of the dandelion, which could be obtained even in midwinter. These were washed, then juiced, and was expressed from them and given to the sufferers. When this was done, the patient always improved. Then in early spring, he was advised to eat raw as many of the first young dandelion leaves as he could consume. This healthful salad soon restored him to health and vigor. I do not think it is an exaggeration to say that this vitamin-filled wild plant has, over the centuries, probably saved a good many lives. But how the mighty have fallen. This herbal hero, one of the most healthful and genuinely useful plants in the materia medica of the past, is now a despised lawn weed. Now that supermarkets sell green vegetables throughout the winter and the pharmacists are vending tons of synthetic vitamins, we no longer need to depend on the roots and leaves of this humble plant to ward off sickness and death. So we have turned on the dandelion. Every garden supply house offers for sale a veritable arsenal of diggers, devices, and deadly poisons, all designed to help exterminate this useful and essentially beautiful little plant, which has so immensely benefited the human race. And I have a friend named Doug Elliott who lives in Painter's Gap, North Carolina. And this is what he has to say about dandelion.
Dandelions, they're my favorite flowers in the sunshine or during a shower. Dandelions, they be popping up everywhere. They don't care. Dandelions, they never take a vacation. They always popping up without invitation. Dandelions, there's always enough to share. went to the store where the gardeners go to buy me some dandelion seeds. The man behind the counter said, son, don't you know you don't have to plant them, they grow like a weed. Wow! Dandelions, they don't have to be planted. Why does everyone take them for granted? Dandelions, they're special as you and me. So you wake up in the morning, you're feeling kind of low. Your get up and go is gone. You need some vitamins, some remedies, some tonic or some tea. Well, look out in your lawn. You got dandelions by the bunch or the bowlful. Eat them all up, they'll make you feel soulful. Dandelions, they're special as you and me. Dandelions, they're good for your liver. Eat them all up, they make you jump up and shiver. Dandelions, they'll make a long liver out of you. Dandelions, blow those seeds and make wishes for money, world peace, or lots of sweet kisses. Dandelions, they'll make your wishes come true. Well, I found that song on a children's tape by Lisa Atkinson, and then I added the medicinal verses to it because, you know, when you talk about dandelions, we need to talk about the whole thing. So, all right.
So I agree with him. You have to talk about the whole thing. That's the surprising thing or the wonderful thing about dandelion. It's one of the first fresh foods of spring. The 19th century New Zealand herbalist James Neal wrote, "This is the celebrated plant in which the common people of every land have faith." And the tradition of eating dandelion plants as a spring tonic has been a widespread European practice that was also imported to the New World by colonists in the 1600s. That's when dandelions first came into this world, in America. So I am, I don't know if you're aware, but I've for a few times over the past 10 years, I've hosted a dandelion dinner, where I make a whole dinner based on dandelions. And of course, the best time of the year is when the dandelions are in full bloom, which they are not now, but they're still can use parts from now. But when I prepare my dandelion meal, what I do is take the leaves and I make a pesto out of it to make as an hors d'oeuvre, and I put that on a cracker with some smoked fish. It's a very great hors d'oeuvre. And then another plant that we'll be talking about a little bit are the ramps or the wild leeks. I make a ramp potato soup. The main course is a dandelion quiche, basically, and you take the dandelion leaves and you treat them just like you would spinach and make a quiche out of it. And then you serve it. I serve it with dandelion greens that are parboiled and then stir fried on a side with balsamic vinegar on them. Then for the dessert, I should back up a moment. When I serve the hors d'oeuvres, I serve it with dandelion wine lemonade, which is made from the flowers are used to make the dandelion wine. And then for the dessert, I have dandelion blossom cake, which is made with the dandelion blossoms too. And I serve that with roasted dandelion root tea, which is taking the roots and roasting them and making a tea, which is quite delicious. So anyways, you can use the whole plant. Some people, I've seen some people take the buds of the flowers when they're just still in bud stage, and pickle them and use them with vinegar, and use them kind of as a dressing, kind of like and instead of like capers and things. And then here we'll see. Let's go through this real quick. I got some more information. So it's very, very nutritious. This is a cup of the chopped leaves. Has all these nutrients, protein, carbohydrates, fiber. It's got lots of vitamins and minerals. Vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E. So there's lots of nutrients in them. These are the things that during the winter when you didn't have fresh vegetables, these were some of the things that you were missing that are very important to make sure that you got in your diet. So that you get them all from dandelion leaves, just loaded with stuff. The best time to harvest the leaves is from the time they appear until they are too bitter to use. Pick the flowers soon after opening, and then dig the roots in spring and fall. There has the medicinal qualities of the plant. The leaves are diuretic, especially with water retention due to heart problems. So if you had, this is something that you could use. Oftentimes people who have heart medicines are taking diuretics, so you could possibly substitute this or add this to it because this would strengthen your diuretic system. It's also a good source of potassium. I mentioned the roots. Oh no, I'm sorry. The yellow color of the dandelions is from the abundance of the antioxidant lutein, which is also found in the leaves. And there's evidence that increasing lutein intake lowers the risk of cataract development. And there's a lot of people that are going out and buying lutein off the shelf, spending a lot of money to buy a supplement, which is so abundant. It's interesting, when you talk about food and your diet, they often say about getting more color in your diet. Almost invariably, the elements in the chemicals in the plant that are giving it as color are also antioxidants. And so you want an antioxidant-rich diet, and that's why eating fruits and vegetables that have all this color, that's what you're missing when you don't have them in your diet. Dandelion roots, the bitter root compounds stimulate the appetite and promote digestion. Bitter is a really important thing. Bitter is a really important thing to get in your diet. When we start talking about some of the greens that are being used, that you can eat, the wild greens, a lot of them have a bitterness to them, and bitterness is not a bad thing. I mean, it sometimes takes a little bit of time to develop a taste for bitter, but our tongues have taste receptors that recognize 5 different flavors. There's sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and what they call umami, or the savory flavor. And most people avoid bitter things. What bitters does is it stimulates your liver function, it stimulates your digestion, it stimulates your appetite. People who have cancer should be taking bitters because they oftentimes don't have a very good appetite and they're not digesting their food very well. Anybody who has a chronic digestive problem should be taking bitters. I have bitters myself. I use dandelion root. I take the root of the plant and I soak it in alcohol, vodka, for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then I start to use it, just a few drops at a time. You can use like half a dropper full as a dose, and it really can make a big difference in your any kind of digestive issues that you have, including skin problems. A lot of people who have eczema and stuff like that, it's due to the fact, at least from an herbalist standpoint, the reason that you get eczema is your liver, it becomes overworked, can't remove toxins effectively from the body. And so an alternative route to remove toxins from your body is through your skin. And when they remove the toxins through your skin, you get eczema and psoriasis, those types of things. So by taking an herb like dandelion, it helps to improve liver function so that you don't have to, so that the liver can do its job more effectively. And just finally about dandelion, the whole plant, I said the stems, when you break the stems, the milky white latex from the stem is an effective treatment for warts. Just apply it directly to the wart and let it dry. If you have a wart and you start applying that, it could probably take, it depends on how old or where it is, how big it is, several weeks. But if you stick to it, it'll slowly disappear, basically, I guess you could say. Any plant that has that white latex exudate can be useful. One we'll see if we get a chance to go outside is the milkweed. So now I'm not going to give you as in-depth information about all the plants that I want to talk about today. I'm just going to start giving you pictures of some of them and talking a little bit about them. But of course, these are the leeks, or the wild ramps, the wild leeks, I should say, or the ramps. And they're like little oniony, garlicky type, savory. They're so delicious. I don't know if you've ever tried them. Some people who don't like garlic say they're a little strong for them. I don't know. I make soup. I make for a soup out of them with potato ramp soup is really delicious. I also what I'll do with the bulbs. is I'll cut them. I'll chop up the bulbs, the little white bulbs, and chop them up and dry them, and put them in a bottle, and then I store them for the winter, and I can use them in like soups and stews and stuff like that for flavoring. It's very good. After the leaves disappear, the flower stalk comes up. It has a beautiful little white flower, and eventually it turns into these black seeds, which you might see sticking up through the forest floor as you're walking around. They usually grow in wooded areas, and they're very abundant here in Door County. There are some places in the United States where they're considered endangered, but we have no problem. There's a plot I know where I go to harvest mine. It's a 10-acre plot, and I swear it's got tens of thousands of these plants growing on it. So the thing is, it all depends on not over harvesting, and that's not going to happen really. So, anyways, and sulfur, like garlic, and onions, these leeks have a lot of sulfur in them, and sulfurs are things that the body can use as anti-inflammatories to help with inflammatory. So if you have any kind of inflammatory diseases, like onions and garlics and leeks or ramps are a really good thing to add to your diet. When I think about medicine too, and about herbs, I don't like to call an herb a drug because I don't think it is. It's a food. And so, a lot of times you can incorporate these things right into your diet, and that's certainly what foraging is all about. So now we're going to talk about some of the greens that you can make, into a salad or whatever. Wood sorrel is also called, some people call it sour grass. It has a sour flavor, and that's completely edible. And then we have like chickweed, another one that has a real tiny little white flowers, and we also have other ones like wintercress, also known as yellow rocket. And when you're eating the leaves of all these plants, as a salad, it's better to get the freshest ones possible. They certainly, as the older plant, as the plant gets older, the leaves get older, they'll start to have more bitterness. But as I mentioned before, bitter is really important. So it's not a bad idea to have bitters. In fact, historically in Europe, the salads were never served before the main course. They were always served after the main course, and they were made with bitter greens, because that's what you want. The bitterness helps to stimulate your digestion, and also stimulates your liver function, enzyme release, all sorts of good things. Violet, the leaves are, great salad green, and you could add the flowers to that. Violets are high in vitamin C. All these are oops, did I shut it off? Hello. All of these plants that are flowering, almost all flowers are edible. I mean, all the daisies we got growing out there. I mean, you just take off the petals. Or you could use the whole flower here with the violet. And then there's watercress, which grows in streams and is a member of the nasturtium family, interestingly enough. And also purslane, which can be a garden. Some people have that growing in their gardens. They don't want it, but instead of just hacking it away, you should eat it because it's very nutritious. Again, all these plants, are sending up their leaves in early spring after a long winter. So from a forager's standpoint, if you were relying on not going to the grocery store, or if you didn't have a grocery store to go to, then you would get so much value from the nutrients that are in these plants. Milkweed is an interesting one. Of course, it's great food for the monarch butterflies, as we all know. That's why everybody's growing them. But the pods, before they're fully developed into seeds, are actually quite delicious. What you can do with the pods is you can take them, and you have to take them before the seeds start to get the little floss on them like that. But take them, and you can take the inside off if you want to or not, and you parboil them for a short while, a couple minutes, and then you stir fry them with butter and garlic or something like that, and they're quite delicious actually. And this is one of those. The other, the interesting thing about like the floss that comes out of these, that carries the seeds all over the place. That's why it moves around the world so easily. They used to during World War One. They used to go out and collect that and use that in life jackets and for flotation devices because they couldn't get K-POC anymore because that was a Japanese thing, right? So this is World War II, I guess, not World War One, and so it's and they're waterproof. So that I can imagine that other people have used it for stuffing in a quilt or something like that to make it warmer. So milkweed could be a very useful plant that way. And this is also one of those plants that really has a lot of that white latex that comes out when you break off just a bottom leaf or something. Put it directly on like a wart or some other skin growth, and just watch it, slowly melt away. It doesn't really melt away, I guess, but figuratively speaking. So then the clovers, red clover, of course, is the main one you see so much of around. It's a beautiful plant, I think. It's got interesting leaves. It's got the little arrowhead chevron in the leaf there as a dead giveaway. But clover is a good foraging food for like Native Americans would steam it. Steam the clover. You can steam the flowers and the leaves. Any of the clovers that are there, like the sweet clover that you see growing all around the white, the white sweet clover, or there's some other clovers that the small little, I don't even know what they're called, the little white clovers that grow in your grass. All those clovers are edible, and they're very nutritious. And again, they come up early in spring. So even if you were a forager and you lived where there was no grocery store, you would have a garden in the summer, but your garden wouldn't be producing until the middle of June or July or so, and so you need all your fresh vegetables before that. Then there's nettles, also known as stinging nettles. A lot of people are wary of it because it's got little hairs on the stem that if you brush against it, it can cause quite a severe reaction. The trick to harvesting nettles, and you just would take the young leaves at the top, of course, is to grab the stem firmly and don't let go until you're ready to drop it off, because those little hairs are actually, if you could see them under a microscope, are actually spring-loaded. Inside the pores that those hairs grow, there's a little like spring structure, so that when you brush against it, it shoots out, and you get that formic acid or something like that causes the reaction. So, but this is a good, all these herbs, these green herbs, pot herbs that you call them, are good especially nettles, if you blanch them a little bit before you cook them, before you stir fry them or put them into whatever, because that'll help a lot with the digestibility, and also just to make them a little not so quite as crunchy, I guess. Then there's the infamous garlic mustard. This actually was a herb that was cultivated in people's gardens, and then it broke free, and it's all over the place. This is actually a good one. I mixed this with the dandelion leaves for making the pesto because it has that strong garlic flavor. But you can use it in soups and stews, in a salad. If you like the garlic flavor. The thing is, a lot of these, like we were talking about the sour grass. The sorrel, that's a sour flavor. So, and then you have the garlic flavor. You have these herbs, these plants have different flavors. So if you mix them, the greens together, and then add a little vinegar and oil for that oily texture, they could make quite a delicious salad. And then there was one of our beautiful ones, the everlasting pea, which are in full bloom now all over the place. And they do have come out with pea pods in the very end, and they're very tiny little peas. But if you're diligent, what I've done is when I harvest them, I've actually harvested them. I've split open the thing and taken out the piece, and I make a hummus-like thing with the piece, which is quite good. So, and it's very nutritious. I tried stir frying the pea pods once. That didn't work. And what I should have done was parboil them first and then stir fry them. That might work better because they were really stringy. So, but if you're diligent enough, you can pick enough of those. And right now, there's an awful lot of them out there. You can make this hummus-like preparation that is quite tasty, actually. And then there's a whole group of other of the berries, like the thimbleberry, which is now it's past the flowering stage, but the berries aren't quite. I haven't seen any ripe berries yet, but they are delicious. Have you all had tried thimbleberries? You know, it's interesting because you won't ever see I've hardly ever see a commercial product with thimbleberries. If you've ever tried to harvest them, they just kind of like fall apart in your hand so easily. Or if you throw them if you pile them up in a bowl, or they crush each other, you know. But they're very delicious, I think. And okay, the thing about berries is that they're loaded with antioxidants, and you know, every few years in the natural products industry, some berry becomes really popular. Like lately, it's been the acai berry, and it used to be the bilberry. And the thing is, all these berries, they come from all around different parts of the world. There really is no difference in what they're providing to the human body from whether it's a thimbleberry or acai berry. The thing about them is that what they've done is somebody has done research and done some studies on the berry, and so they publish them, and so then everybody wants to, you know, get on the wagon. And if you look at what it is they're using them for, like as an anti-inflammatory, primarily, or as antioxidants, it's the same types of components in all berries. So you don't really need to spend a lot of money for acai berries. Right now, what you want to get is raspberries are coming in right now, and oh, are they delicious? So we just got done with strawberries, right? But then there's the wild strawberries, which when we first moved up here, right across the street from the grounds here, there was a big open field that was part of the Sequist Orchard. And now there's trees there. But when I first moved, it was just loaded with wild strawberries. I remember I was able to pick enough strawberries to make enough for me and my wife to have it over ice cream. But I mean, they're so tiny, and you know, it depends on the year and how much water you get. But they are very nutritious. And the black raspberries. I mean, again, it's the antioxidants that are in here that are so important, that have so many functions in the body that we need to have them on a regular, ongoing basis. There's the wild grapes, which are very sour, but you know, you can make a jam out of them, or I've heard some people even use the soda stream to make a soda out of them. But you have to add sugar. I mean, they're really. I mean, I've eaten them without sugar, just off the tree, and they're not. I mean, they taste like grapes, but they're very, very, very sour. And then there's the cherries, or in this case, the wild cherry that I'm interested in. A little bit different than our native cherry trees. And wild cherries do actually get cherries on them, which are very, very bitter. But they call it choke cherries. They call them choke cherry tree too, as well. But what I like the wild cherry is for is the bark. And if you take when you're taking the bark from a plant, you don't take the bark off the trunk. You take a branch, and you can strip the bark off there. And when you cook that up, and you can make a wild cherry syrup. Remember, some of you probably remember Luden's wild cherry cough drops. They actually at one time had wild cherry in it. Now they just have artificial flavors. So you don't get the benefit of wild cherry, the bark. It's interesting, when you cook the bark, it's brown and kind of mottled a little bit of reddish shows through. When you cook the bark, and it takes 2 or 3 hours to do it, you get this deep red syrupy liquid, and then you can add honey to it to make a cough syrup. What I actually do is I mix the cherry bark, and I take pine needles from the white pine, and I cook those up, and I combine those two together along with honey. It's a great cough syrup. It's an expectorant. It helps to relieve, so you can cough stuff out. So it doesn't suppress the cough. It helps you to get through, get the phlegm out of your system. So that's wild cherry. Oh, and then there's the sumac. Smooth sumac. Some of you may have heard of, some they call it scout lemonade, where you can actually it is very sour fruit. And in fact, if you don't get it when it's completely red and there's some green left underneath it, like right now that looks very red, but if you don't get it at the right time, the green underneath it, that is the epitome of sourness. But it's really a nice, it's a herb, it's a cooling herb, so it's a good one to use for to help if you have an ongoing inflammatory process. It would be a good herb to have for the urinary tract also. One of the other herbs I use that we'll be talking about a little bit is juniper, and juniper is really good for the urinary tract. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to it. So so then there's the high bush cranberry that herbalists know as cramp bark. As the name implies, the bark of the plant is used to treat cramping, especially of soft muscles like involuntary muscles like the uterus or the stomach, that type of thing. If you have any cramping, it's also been used in the past for like bad coughing, or really hoarse, bad coughing. But I've also used the berries, and they're very sour. I mean, they call it high bush cranberry because it has a cranberry-like flavor, even more sour than cranberries are. But I've used it to make like a ketchup. And you take the berries and you mix it with, cinnamon and cloves and some other things, and it's a very tasty thing. It would be almost like a substitute for things like Heinz 57, the steak sauces. You could use it as a steak sauce, that type of thing. It's pretty tasty. It's an acquired taste, but it is edible, and it does. So it also will help, with if you do have a cramping problem. So the berries probably would help too. Then there's elderberry, which you don't see too much of up here. I know there are some, but elderberry, early pioneers would make something called the elderberry shrub, where they would make the elderberry with alcohol, make an extract of it, and they make it with honey. And it's become, there's a product on the market now called Sambucol, which is for supposedly anti-flu. And there is some research in Israel that shows that they have some antiviral activity, not real strong particularly, but it's a good tonic herb. This would be if you have someone in the wintertime who's got a cough or a cold or chronic lung problems or something like that. Elderberry might be very good to strengthen them so that they can survive flus and other things like that more effectively. But if you're a healthy person and you get the flu, it's probably not going to do a whole lot for you. Tastes good, but I've also made with the elderberries. I made a pie. Elderberry pie is quite good too. Except they're really small berries, so it takes a lot of work and to work with it. Then we have juniper, Juniperus communis. Now this is the same juniper that in Europe grows 7 or 8 feet tall. It's the same plant, but it's adapted to this climate this way. And there you see what most people would call juniper berries, but which are actually cones. If you ever take a close look at them, they are not berries, but I will continue to call them such because everybody does. But they are cones, greenish cones that have this blue powdery surface on them. Now, the juniper is what we use. Juniper is what we use to make gin. And in fact, on Washington Island, they have an annual. They started doing this a few years ago. They have an annual juniper harvest, and there's a company up there. I can't remember what it's called that makes gin out of it. Did somebody say what the name of it was? I don't know if anybody else. No. Anyways, so but the problem I have with gin, as far as and calling it, say it's made from juniper, is that if you have a clear liquid, I can't see how there could be anything other than alcohol in there anymore. Maybe a little bit of flavoring. So what juniper is used for is for a urinary tract. It's really good for especially for people who have chronic urinary tract infections. My wife has even had an infection clear up by using it. And the way I use it is I take those about 100 of those cones and I soak them in 3 or 4 ounces of gin. So I make juniper gin, I call it. And then I make a cocktail out of that. I take a tablespoon of that, and I put about 2 or 3 ounces of cranberry juice, which is also good for your kidneys. And then I add a sumac ice cube. So I take the sumac that I've made the lemonade out of, and I freeze it. And so that's also good because it's cooling, so it's good for the urinary tract. So I call it a juniper gin cocktail. And what I recommend is if somebody who has a chronic problem where a lot of women have this problem where it keeps recurring, I recommend that they have a juniper gin cocktail like 3 or 4 times a week. And if you actually have a urinary tract infection, for 2 or 3 days, you could take 2 or 3 of those cocktails a day to try to get rid of it. You don't want to take it for a long time. A lot of people will tell you that juniper is toxic. Well, almost a lot of things are toxic if you take too much of them, but don't worry about it for that particular use. So it's not a berry. So my favorite berry, which is not a berry, is the hawthorn. This is the flowering hawthorn. This is the hawthorn tree where I harvest my hawthorn. This is out in front of, it's over in Ephraim, and it's right next to where the right past where the gem shop is there. I can't remember what it's called. Anyways, and it's a beautiful flower when it flowers, and then it has these incredible thorns. I don't know if you can see them. Can you see them on here? Look at that thorn. And it's like, that's why it's, and the reason it's called hawthorn is because those are not berries, as my friend Tom tells me all the time. They are haws. And there they are. And you can see the haws in comparison to the thorn there. But they're actually a member of the apple family. Hawthorn is related to apples and roses, interestingly enough, are all in the same family. And hawthorn is an excellent heart tonic. It's also, I've also made like hawthorn butter type of thing, where I use the haws. I always call them berries too. To make like a hawthorn butter, and then you could save that and spread it on. So if you want to take hawthorn, I've been taking hawthorn myself personally as a tincture. I make an extract of the hawthorn, of the berry, of the haws. I make an extract of that with vodka, and I've been taking a daily dose of 2 tablespoons of that for about 25 years. So it's a heart tonic. And I have heart problems. I've always had heart problems, but I think it helps to it helps to balance my heart. It's food. Like I mentioned, I'm not taking it because it has a drug-like effect on my heart. I'm taking it because it's food for my heart. And that's what hawthorn is. It's food for your heart. Then there's all kinds of nuts that you can get. There's the hickory nut. I don't know if there's any hickory nut trees. I love this one because I once had a cabin down in the Kickapoo area, and there was a hickory nut tree there, and it was just like I would get like a shopping bag full every time I went there to harvest it. The problem is that they're very difficult to clean. I mean, to get the nuts out of there and to make like a pecan pie, like a hickory nut pie. But the nuts are very nutritious. We have then there's the mighty oak, And of course, the acorns can be used as food. Oak bark is a good astringent herb, so it's good. I use oak bark as a tincture. I make it, and it's good for like hemorrhoids, topically for hemorrhoids, for gum issues, as a mouthwash. The mighty oak can be very nutritious. You can make acorns, you can make like a flour out of them. Then there's the black walnuts, which are, which are also very difficult to harvest. Not to harvest, but to cut open that outer shell and then crack open the nut and get the meat out. But they are very nutritious. Of course, there's all kinds of mushrooms, and everybody knows the morel mushrooms. Those are real common. But there's so many other ones. Those are the first ones that usually come in the spring. This is actually some that I harvested one year, about 2 years ago, in my backyard here in Ellison Bay. I was looking around, and I was looking at this pot where there was a lot of plants growing, a lot of, I can't remember what it was. And all of a sudden I look, there's a morel. And all of a sudden they started popping up all over the place. I think about 1.5 pounds of morels I had. And there hasn't been another one since then. I've never had a real good luck with them. But there's all sorts of other mushrooms. There's the chicken of the woods, which is quite delicious actually, and very obvious. What it is. They got bright orange and yellow. This is the coral. These are one of the tooth fungi, a coral tooth they call it, and that is edible. And then this one is this is called the horse's hoof or the foamies. This one is not edible in the sense that it doesn't taste good, but it is really a good one that you could take for medicinal qualities. One of the things that mushrooms are really good is for your immune system and your immune response. And so you get a lot of these, what they're called mucopolysaccharides in them, and they're very important for your immune response. So mushrooms are really quite useful. Let's see, I got some more here. There's also like the oyster mushrooms. Oh, shoot. And then there's I call that old man's beard in the corner there. That's that is another, what kind of, the one I just had? Boy, sometimes, another tooth mushroom, right. And then there's the angel wings, which is related to the oyster mushroom. And then there's a turkey tail, which is another one that looks like a turkey tail. That's why it's called that. Trametes. It's not very tasty, but it's really, they've done quite a bit of research on this for different types, treating, support treatment in cancers and other degenerative diseases. So it's a good one to know, and that grows quite a lot all around Door County. And there's a puffballs, if you come across, look how big that is. That's my hand there on the puffball, basketball size. Those are really quite good if you get them at the right stage before they start to sporulate. But because you can slice them, and they're like real dense tissue, and you slice them, and I marinate it in like garlic and soy sauce. And then after it's marinated for a while, then in the morning I fry it in a fry pan, and then I have some eggs with it. It's really quite tasty. Or you can make a sandwich out of it. And then there's the chanterelles, which apparently are starting to come out right now. I heard. That's another one I've never had really good luck finding. But one of my favorites is the hedgehog mushroom, which is the one there, which is kind of an ugly looking thing, a little blob. But it is. But it's interesting. It's got instead of having it has whole, not spores. Can't think of the term. Anyways, it's a very tasty mushroom, and oftentimes overlooked because it doesn't look very appetizing, does it? Okay, so mushrooms are very important, and I think mushrooms are. I think mushrooms have taken over the world, actually. I think there's solid evidence that every plant has a mushroom, has some kind of mycelium that's associated with it. And we have them in our bodies all the time. They're very useful to know, and you have to be careful. There are a small number of them that are very toxic. There's actually one that grows here in Door County, the Amanita, the white one, anyways. There's another variety that it'll like destroy your liver in a matter of days. I mean, it's like very toxic. But for the most part, and the other thing, the recommendation is always to cook a mushroom. Don't eat raw mushrooms, because there are even mushrooms that are edible and considered safe. There's a chemical in there that if you take too much of it and it's raw, it can accumulate in your system, and by cooking them, you destroy that chemical. So, word of advice. Then there are some. Herbs that you just use because they taste good, or for tea. There's wild marjoram, which we'll see it once we get outside. I thought afterwards, if you want to stick around, we'll go for a short little walk. There are a few of these plants I can show you. But it's a very delicious tea. It has a very interesting flavor, aromatic flavor. Chicory root. Here we go. All right, chicory root. I made some roasted chicory root tea here. In fact, maybe, let's do it now. I'm gonna pour some cups, and if somebody wants to come up and distribute these, if you all want to try it. This is a tea made from roasted chicory roots and chocolate mint. Here, let me get it. There you go. Let's do it. You want to do that? Okay. So I'll let Cheryl continue to do that, and then chicory is one of those actually related to dandelion, and just like the dandelion root, chicory root is a bitter. But when you roast it like I do, you bring out some of the natural sweetness of it. And of course, I've also added honey to this, so this has a honey. So the chocolate mint I'm talking about is actually a chocolate mint plant. It's not a flavoring. It's actually I grow it in my backyard. It kind of has taken over a section of my backyard. So anyway, so it has the bitterness, a little bit of bitterness to it, and that's really good because that stimulates your appetite. It's good for your liver, all those types of things. The flowers themselves are short lasting, so what you use is the root, and it takes about 2.5 to 3 hours at 250 degrees to roast the roots, and then when you make the tea, you can't. You have to actually cook it in a pot. Put it in a pot and bring it to a boil, and cook it for about 3 or 4 hours before it really gets the strong. Get that flavor going and stuff. So it's a lot of it. Times how a tea tastes is important. How you make it. What do you think?
I love it. Is that delicious? The same chicory that they use in coffee.
Yep.
Down south?
Yep. In fact, story is that the chicory came to Wisconsin with Southern prisoners of war that were kept at Camp Randall in Madison. Because Camp Randall at one time was a prisoner of war camp before it became Camp Randall Stadium where the Wisconsin Badger football team plays. So, and then, here's another delicious tea can make with linden or basswood flowers, linden flowers. This is in bloom right now. And so if you have a basswood tree or around, I highly recommend harvesting the flowers and drying them, and then you can make a tea, or you can use them fresh too and make a tea out of them. And this is with flower teas, like I mentioned with the chicory, that you want to let it cook for about 3 or 4 hours. With a flower tea, you only need to let it pour boiling water over it and let it sit for 20 minutes or so. And then with linden flowers, I like to add a little touch of sugar because that makes the flavor pop really nicely. And linden is good for the heart, actually. It's a good heart herb. And then there's wild carrot or Queen Anne's lace. I don't know if you knew that Queen Anne's lace is related to the carrot. We'll see that when we go outside. But Queen Anne's lace is the blossoms. Take the blossoms though, and make a tea out of them. I usually make a tea where I'll pour I'll put about 7 or 8 or 9 of those umbels of flowers from the plant in a quart or 2-quart jar, and then I'll cover it with boiling water, and then I'll sit for 24 hours, and then I'll put it in the refrigerator, and it gets, when it's cold, and you can leave the flowers in all the time. When it gets cold, it really has a mild, it's very delicious flavor. It's a mild carrot-like flavor, actually. Not sweet, but not not very sweet. And it's actually good for your glandular system. So that there's one group of women on the East Coast who promote it as a way to prevent to prevent pregnancy because of the effect on the glands. But there's also historically the Pennsylvania Dutch, who apparently learned it from the Native Americans, would use the flower tea for diabetes or to help control blood sugar levels, which is a glandular problem. And then there's wintergreen, which grows on the Lake Michigan side a lot, and it's got that wintergreen flavor. You're probably all familiar with it. You make a tea out of the leaves. It's very nutritious, very delicious, I should say. It also has wintergreen is a source of methyl salicylate, which is an anti-inflammatory. So I make an oil out of it. I take the leaves and I chop them up, and I cover them with olive oil, and then I use that oil as a salve, like on my knees. I've got bad knees, so it helps with the pain a little bit of the knees and stuff. That's methyl salicylate you see in a lot of those topical topical gels for pain relief. The ones that are the icy hot type of things. And then another one favorite herb of mine is St. John's wort, and that's an interesting herb. Right now, this is blooming right now, so I just recently harvested some. And what I do is this is it. It's hard to see in this light. Maybe this light, you can see you can still see it's yellow. I got the yellow leaves and the green, the leaves at the top of the plant, the flowering tops. And I did this 3 days ago. And I covered it with olive oil. And now I'm going to let it sit. I usually put it outside in the sun. And over a period of about 3 or 4 weeks, it'll turn into this beautiful red oil. I mean, I take the flowers out, of course. I mean, this is without the flowers in it. But this red product comes from St. John's wort, and it's really fascinating to me. And it's really a great for topically for pain, for where it's particular not for inflammation like of joints, but like for where there's your nerves are involved, like sciatica, or like people who have plantar fasciitis. Works really well for on the bottom of your feet, or for sunburn, or for shingles. Another thing that seems to be really helpful for. So it's really a good topical way to use it. I mean, some of you probably have heard of St. John's wort before. They talk about using it as an antidepressant. It's not very effective as an antidepressant. But this is usually topically for pain relief, which is basically what it was used for historically. And so here's another batch I made once. That's with the yellow flowers, and they're just after the oil is put in there, and then you get that brilliant red oil. Another good one to know this time of the year is horsetail. That grows all around the place. Horsetail is a real old type of plant. It's the structure of it. You can see the joints as you go up along there. You can actually pull them apart right at the joint. They'll just pull apart just like they're stacked together. And this plant is loaded with minerals. So what I like to do with it, I'll take this and I'll stuff a whole bunch of it in a 2-quart jar. I'll cover it with boiling water, let it sit overnight, and then you have this mineral-rich drink. And like during this summer, people are all talking about taking Gatorade. this will have more minerals than Gatorade does. It have more variety of minerals than Gatorade does. And if you want it doesn't taste too bad after you've let it sit for a while. If you just pour boiling water over it and drink it, tastes very grassy. But if you let it sit overnight for 24 hours, then some of the natural sweetness will come out a little bit of it about it. But what I also do is I make hibiscus tea from the hibiscus flowers, which is a sour tasting tea, and I mix the two together. And so you have this great electrolyte drink for the summer. It's also good for the urinary tract. So anytime you have urinary tract problems, I know that herbalists use it to treat kids who have problems with bedwetting. So those are the herbs. So I want to talk about the ones that I'm familiar with. There are many more, I'm sure. So, but I just thought I'd give you a couple of resources if you're interested. I do have, for many years, for 17 years, I was the producer, film, videographer, etc. For Herb TV, which is on YouTube. And right now there's about 160 pieces on herbs, on how to use herbs medicinally and as food. Right now it's been taken over. I've donated it to the American Botanical Council, so they're doing it right now and they're adding new content to it. So that's a good resource for information about herbs, and it's free. HealthyNet, if you want a website, there's a website called healthy.net, and they have an herbal materia medica section. And in that herbal materia medica, you can look up, I think they have about 80 or 90 or more herbs that they have listed, and they have little, what scientifically they call a monograph, where you have a listing of how it should be grown or where it grows and how it should be used, etc. So that's a good online resource for information about herbs. And then if you want some information about foraging and food and which plants are edible, there's two different websites, practicalselfreliance.com and ediblewildfood.com. Or you can get one of these books. I mentioned Ewell Gibbons, Stalking the Wild Asparagus. That was the one I used so many years ago. There's also Tom Brown is also another guy who's been doing a lot of foraging and wild edible medicinal plants. His book, and then there's also this encyclopedia, if you will, called Edible Wild Plants. It's the North American field guide. I guess they have them for different continents as well. But there's a lot of information about plants which are edible or not in there. So different ways to get your information. Any questions? So if people want, yeah.
How do you clean your things? Do you put them in? Do you just clean them with water, or do you put a little bit of vinegar in them? Or?
What do you mean by cleaning?
When you pick something, do you just wash it?
Oh.
Water, like I've seen some people say wash berries that you pick in vinegar and it'll kill off the little pests.
Yeah, I don't know. I if anything, I use water. I think the problem you get into when people start saying, all the little pests that are on there. Well, yeah, probably. The thing is, we've tried to make things so sterile that we've caused problems because of that. That's why antibiotics don't work anymore. And so, I think, there's evidence that kids who live on outside a lot and have more exposure to the outside have fewer asthma problems than kids who don't. And a lot of it has to do with the types of organisms you come into contact with. Like I mentioned, the fungi. They're all over the place, and they have a lot of good things to do in our body. So, yeah.
I guess my question is, how did you come up with your recipes, your secret sauce of,
Or online.
Sunshine for 2.5 hours.
Yeah. But online, I've been working at this for about 50 years, I suppose, and so from other people, as far as specific recipes, like for dandelion recipes, there's all sorts of them online. That's a good place to go for that kind of stuff. If you, Sometimes people say, well, the information about herbs, you can't trust it. Well, if you're just using it for food, what the hell? It's not. I mean, it's like, and that it all gets back to the whole idea that herbs are not drugs; they're food, and that's the thing to keep in mind. And so I think, yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Are there parts of Queen Anne's lace and the sweet peas that are toxic?
Not that I'm aware of. The whole issue of toxins, I think, is overblown. Again, I think it comes partly from the idea that people are trying to equate, are thinking in their minds that an herb is a drug, and there's all sorts of toxic drugs that are used. I mean, digoxin, purple foxglove, is toxic if you take too much of it. The nightshade, nightshade is what tomatoes are. Remember the nightshade family, right? And there's something that they call the purple nightshade. It has those purple flowers, and it's got little red tomatoes, basically. And it's said that those are toxic, right? Well, it's estimated that you have to eat about 200 of those to get to the point where you're going to have. So if you're just trying a few of them here or there, the other thing is, when they talk about when a pharmacologist or a pharmacist or a doctor talks about toxicity, they're talking about specific chemicals, right? There is no herb on earth that is one chemical. So, for example, ephedra became a big issue. Because it was causing people to die. They were taking it because it came naturally from a plant called the ephedra. And there was this, the ephedrine that came from there was being used in products for weight loss, etc. And they were taking so much of it that it was causing heart attacks and strokes and stuff. But if you took the whole plant, there's actually another chemical in that plant that they know kind of attenuates or balances the effects of the ephedra. So when you're taking the chemical out of a plant, yeah, you're increasing the toxicity. But when if you look at that one chemical, but you can't transmute that information to the whole plant. And that's been shown. There's been herbalists who have gone through and looked at herbs and tried to find out if there's like drug-herb interactions, and they don't happen. All of them that you hear about are speculation based on a specific chemical in the plant. So that's the real problem with toxicity. Is what I mean, I guess you could call. Some people drink too much water; it can kill you. Theoretically, really. So anything can be toxic if you don't use it properly. Yeah.
So I have a comment and then I have a correlating question for you. So my comment is, probably about 27 years ago, somebody told me to go get prescription for natural healing. And it's, it's
Dr. Christopher?
Yes. And so that was my epiphany. And now we own 13 acres where I think we probably have at least 75% of what you showed up there. Oh, wow. Minus the black walnuts and the hawthorn and some of that. But we have everything else. And every year I challenge myself to kind of, to do something with something I find, just kind of grow as a forager. Here's my question. What was your epiphany that started you on this journey?
Well, I think it goes back to when I was in pharmacy school, and like I mentioned earlier, I started to realize that all these drugs are coming from plants. And then, if you look into like drug companies like Eli Lilly and Parker's, all the big ones from the past, which are still around, but they all started business making syrups and extracts and stuff like that. I mean, that was because until about the 1940s, really, there weren't any drugs per se. I mean, that's when the antibiotics started to come out, the sulfa drugs started to come out, back in the So, and the other thing I think that struck me was when I started looking for the plants, and you start to realize that, oh, they all have these different fragrances and these different flavors, and there's, there's so much variety. So I don't think it was one specific thing so much. It's just an arc of stuff that, that happened over a period of time. For 15 years, I worked at a place called Community Pharmacy in Nassau, which is a workers' collective. And when we started out, we didn't, because I was there in the first year, we didn't have any herbs or not many vitamin stuff. We had generics, that was the big thing. But we started to incorporate herbs and homeopathic remedies into the practice because people were asking about them, and so I was interested in it. So, it was just, I started to accumulate my own knowledge about them because I was using them and helping other people decide how to use them. So it was kind of, it wasn't, I don't think it was one specific thing. So. Any other questions? Well, do you all want to take a little walk or not? I mean, it would take about, I'd say, let's see, what time we have here. What time, is there a certain time limit you were going to give on this show?
No time limit.
Okay, because it'll probably take 15 or 20 minutes. We'll just go out, I should go this way. And just walk, there's a few plants. The one thing about, the property around here, is that it's restored farmland. And, I don't know if you know, right now there's a, something called Prairie Fest going on around Door County. We're actually for this weekend, we're taking people to talk about prairies. Because there's a guy, Bob Boltman, who likes to help people restore prairies or something like that. And so there's really not a really good variety of plants here on this property compared to what is, you can find in other parts, depending on what you're looking for, So, I mean, that's the one thing about foraging, you have to find out where the good spots are to do everything, right? I mean, but the first part is to know the plants, and to know what they look like, and to feel comfortable with collecting them and stuff. All right, so let me just